I remember one of my high school teachers accused me of plagiarizing all of my papers because I got straight A's on all my essays. I got A's on my term papers, and she gave me a C. And when I confronted her, I said, "Why did you give me a C?" She said, "Because somebody else has been writing your papers." And I've spoken to young students of color where their teachers have told them the exact same thing.
Well, after nearly 3 years, a lawsuit against the Kern High School District has been settled. The suit says that students of color were discriminated against when it comes to discipline in the district. Now, the settlement says that it's going to result in some changes to the district's practices, but the district says that many of these practices were already in place.
I feel like a lot of the teachers have gone to a point where they just don't really care about the futures of their students.
The lawsuit questions the discipline practices of the district staff, specifically involving race.
So we know that racial bias is so prevalent in our school systems, and so that's why we have to question when they use the words dropout. And I think a lot of us accepted that kind of language for a long time, and they would say, well, you know, the Latino students, they have a hard time with the English language. And then we have to ask, well, what about the African American students? They understand English very well. How can you say that they are just dropping out? And now we know that is a misnomer, that it's not dropout, it's push out. And that's, of course, what we are fighting against. So it's kind of stopping that school-to-prison pipeline.
%40 of the highest suspending school districts in the entire state of California, 40% are in the Central Valley. So when we talk about the school-to-prison pipeline, for us, it's very real. Unfortunately, we build more prisons in our region than we do universities.
In 2010, the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, issued a comprehensive report looking at suspension and expulsion data across the country. And Kern County was identified as one of the highest expulsion rates in the country, the highest number of students expelled in the state of California, even when compared to Los Angeles. And within those expulsions and suspensions, the disparities in expulsion and suspension rates for African American and Latino students were huge. And so we knew we had to take a look at it, going beyond the individual representation of the students who made it through our door to looking at a more systemic response to that.
I found myself acting out a lot in elementary school, but I think a lot of it had to do with being taken away from my biological mother when I was 7 years old. My mom was full-blooded Native American. She succumbed to diabetes in 2004, died with complications of diabetes to drug and alcohol abuse. So I think school was always kind of a rough area because I didn't really have an identity as being Native American, American Indian, and Chicano. Or I remember one of the first experiences I ever had was taking the CAT test and seeing on the CAT test that my ethnicity was white, and of knowing that I wasn't white because white kids were treated differently inside of our school system. This is a large problem that wasn't just affecting me, but hundreds and thousands of Latino and African American youngsters. It felt like it was righteous to come back and to go toe-to-toe with the Kern High School District and to really fight to make changes, because it's really about life or death.
I went to Golden Valley High School here in Bakersfield, California, which is predominantly low socioeconomic, sort of minority-majority school where we have a large Hispanic and African-American population of students. It's a very hostile environment to students. You know, we had kids getting suspended or kicked out for things like chewing gum or not asking to go use a restroom. And I remember specifically when I was in high school, right, we were policed to the extreme. In order to use the restroom, first we had to ask our, teacher or instructor, and after that, they had to take time out, call the front office to get a security escort to come get us, and then walk us to the bathroom, and then wait for us outside, and then, escort us back to our classrooms.
Michelle Alexander, who wrote the book, The New Jim Crow, she spoke at a conference we had at Stanford, and she talked about a concept called implicit bias or unconscious bias, where your conscious mind wants you to do this, but your unconscious overrides it. And there are many stereotypes people have about Latinos and African Americans that override their conscious desire to be free of bias. So we thought this case would give us an opportunity to test this theory, to challenge the constitutional holding that the only way the Constitution's protection that gives you equal protection of the laws could be violated is if the discrimination is intentional. We could advance the interests of racial justice while also trying to change the law. It turns out that California Rural Legal Assistance was also interested in this case. Greater Bakersfield Legal Aid also was interested, and the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund also wanted to challenge disproportionate suspensions and expulsions.
We started by doing a series of comprehensive Public Record Act requests because only a limited amount of data is reported to the U.S. Department of Education or even the state of California. In order to get information about what was really happening there, we had to get records directly from the school district. Before we filed the lawsuit, we sent a letter to the district saying, here's what we found, here's what we're hearing anecdotally from students and parents who come to see us. We want to sit down with you and see if we could work together to find some option. We were basically told by them, we can handle it ourselves. We don't need you here.
And we said, please acknowledge this as a problem, that there needs to be a resolution. And so they refused. They just, would not come to any kind of compromise. And it was meeting after meeting where we just got very frustrated with that process and said, okay, well, we've given you, fair warning, and we do not want to sue.
We settled last year, July of 2017, after having filed in October of 2014.
The settlement required the district to implement new discipline policies with help from experts on implicit bias and to mandate new teacher trainings that focus less on punitive discipline approaches. Additionally, per the settlement, the district had to host several public forums to share new data on their progress with parents and community members. However, at the forum we attended, there were no open mics to hear community members' feedback, and the district officials only selected written questions they deemed appropriate.
Kern Education Justice Collaborative, why is the community not allowed to ask the questions themselves? Now I'm just going to say this with a smile because I'm not trying to be facetious or condescending or anything. It's just the way it is. This is the way that we've chosen to conduct our forum, and we do allow you to give your questions, and we make sure that we try to get through all of them. And so again, it's just the way that we've decided to conduct our forum. Thank you.
Per the settlement, there is mandatory cultural competency trainings, implicit bias trainings.
Positive behavioral interventions and supports is a systems approach to improving school climate. The idea is to explicitly model, practice, and encourage positive academic, social, behavioral, and emotional skill development for all learners within an educational framework. Per the settlement, the Kern High School District is now implementing PBIS teacher training.
I believe that the teachers are gatekeepers to the opportunities and the possibilities, and everything that you will become will depend on the teachers that you come across. When a young person of color has a teacher of color, they will be more successful in life.
As only a third-year teacher, I'm seeing that I was taught how to teach a certain way, but the teachers who are veterans, who've been doing this for a long time, have been taught very different things, especially in terms of discipline, in terms of understanding a student and reaching the students. Students and teachers should have relationships. They should relate with each other, understand where each other are coming from, basically build the respect that needs to happen in the classroom for there to be inclusion.
And I remember one of the first pieces I wrote was published by the Bakersfield Californian, was about equity over education. The Kern High School District Board of Trustees, or in the Kern High School District, who has like 16 high schools, all across Bakersfield, but in very, very different areas of town with different socioeconomics and demographics. Under this new LCFF formula was allocated the maximum amount of funding. What they were trying to do was essentially splitting up that money equally amongst all these different high schools. And so I basically said, hey, no, we need equity over equality. Do students really have an equal education here in the district, and our students being pushed out. About a week after, I actually got a response from one of the school district board of trustees. He basically accused me of being a brainwashed liberal, and that really validated my work as a journalist, because I knew he was reading what I wrote, and I knew that somebody was paying attention, and it opened up the conversation for more advocacy to be done.
There's no quick fix in discipline reform. I think it takes a long time. Kern High School District is just a really good example of how the Central Valley is going to change. We're seeing that there are all these other school districts in the Central Valley that are going through the exact same thing, that there's just a big push out of students of color. It would be great if Kern High School was able to realize they could be the ones leading the way in discipline reform.
And so we knew that in order to win and to create change in the school boards, we need to have seats at the table. We need to go to these meetings to determine what are the decisions that are being made. Because for so many years, Latinos have not had seats at these tables. We have never felt invited to be part of these meetings.
The terms of the settlement only last 3 years and will expire in 2020. With this in mind, community leaders have formed the Kern Educational Justice Collaborative, a working group that will ensure that the district will be held accountable in the future.
We have the parent and community empowerment. We have a public awareness strategy, as well as litigation when needed.
They are working to transform historically unfair educational systems. This work may take a generation, but clearly it's a step in the right direction.
In the academic year of 2009 to 2010, 2,200 students were expelled from Kern High School District. When the last report that we just received, it's 2019, was that 26 students have been expelled. So we know that our lawsuit and that settlement has made the difference that we intended it to make.
I think we need, more cognizant awareness of where these students are coming from, and we need more listening and less talking. What can you do as a teacher to ensure that they have access to some resources, whether that's extending an assignment or breaking it up into chunks and scaffolding it. But there's lots of resources out there on, inclusive learning and universal design. And so being more aware of these, and also having, some sort of training for implicit bias within our teachers to really encourage people to be involved, to raise your voice in your community, and to fight for what you believe in.